Hi, my name is K.Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me Bill Faring, W9KKN. Bill was part of a prior interview from ZF1A in the Grand Caymans, and then I just met him in person for the first time out in Visalia. And he's got a really rich ham radio background and some great perspective on contesting that I asked him if he would come aboard and share with everybody. Bill, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Kevin.
So let's start with where you are. I presume you're on the West Coast, but looks like you've got a beautiful office location there. Where are you? You at work?
Yeah, I'm at the office right now. I'm just in northern San Jose right now, and I just live a little bit down the street in Sunnyvale.
Nice. And what do you do for work, Bill?
So I'm an architect for a large software product at a computer security company.
So tell me about your ham radio background. I know it's pretty deep. I think that your call sign actually belonged to your grandfather, who you had
Yep.
mentioned was a polymath and autodidact. Seems like a pretty remarkable character, but was it like with Dan Craig and Chris Robot? Was it in the blood, in the family? Is that how you got into the hobby?
That might have been part of it. It's hard to tell, right? But yeah, so let's talk about Grandpa for just a minute, right? So yeah, this is his call sign W9KKN. Even though I'm on the West Coast, I don't think my family would ever forgive me if I changed it. I went through the program with the FCC where if one of them becomes a silent, if somebody with a call sign becomes a silent key, if you happen to be related to them in a few choice ways, you could get their call sign. But yeah, so Grandpa is definitely who kind of kicked this off for me. And I was just this kid. My parents would drop me off at their house in Rochester, Illinois. While they went to work, and the grandparents would watch my brother and I, and Grandpa would take us down to his basement filled with his machine shop and his radio shack, and he'd have these skeds with some of his. Actually, he had a half brother up sort of in northern Illinois that he would regularly have a schedule with, and just during the day he would make contacts and work various DX. And as a kid, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I was just this barely preschool age kid watching what was absolutely pure magic. I mean, I have there's these pictures all over his wall of QSL cards and just pictures with various hams. I just didn't know what I was. I thought every grandpa was this way. He was into all kinds of things. He he actually got started off, to very, I could tell that he had just turned 18. I actually have all of his original logbooks. And I can see that the first few QSOs he made, and then there's this abrupt stop whenever during right after Pearl Harbor in World War II, where they actually paused all amateur radio, and it was at that moment, I believe, that he went and joined the Navy, and actually eventually became an electronics instructor, teaching people how to work on radars and service radios on ships and such. But also, he was a pilot. He, a lot of the things that you sort of saw around his shop or his shack were made by him in the machine shop. So, things like antenna tuners and just pieces for his antenna. He had put up I think 100-foot tower and a beam on top of it, all by himself. Because I guess that's how you did it back then. Including just every part of it, the gin pole and all of that. Just with I think neighbors lightly supervising, and again, it's suffice. So my grandmother, she would buy things at flea markets and garage sales, toys, and have him fix them in his shop so that my brother and I could play with them and such.
So, Bill, clearly he was a great role model, and I understand you getting started in ham radio because of him. It still doesn't really answer the question why you continued. I mean, you're a relatively young man, and one of the things that fascinates me about talking to people like you, Bill, and Levi Jeffries, and many other young people, is why you chose to continue in this hobby, and not just continue, but You're very involved, and not just from a contesting standpoint, but you've volunteered a lot of hours for clubs. I think you're working with Super Check Partial, for example. Tell me about that. Why ham radio when you were, say, in your mid-20s? Why bother with this, what some would call outdated hobby?
The truth is I actually didn't. Grandpa became a silent key. So first of all, he had sort of pressured me to, get my license, and, would quiz me and said, hey, you should really get involved with this. He would always have little, electronics kits for me to try building and soldering and stuff. And I was definitely this, I guess geeky, nerdy little kid that was, I was mostly interested in computers at the time. Uh, so so he was just sort of trying to get me to branch out a little bit into this radio stuff. And when he became a silent key in 2001, I actually fell out of the hobby. I went straight into the computer aspect, and I had just I had this no code technician license, and I was honestly I was very nervous to get on the air. I was always sort of worried I would make a mistake or something like that. I sort of filed away the various radios that I had sort of inherited and had over the years, and ignored them for a number of years, and ended up kind of pursuing my career, as it were, right? And I think it was some I don't remember exactly what got me back in the hobby. Actually, I do. So one day I was just kind of going through some old stuff, and I picked up this old HT, and it was just totally dead, right? I mean, the battery had expired probably 10 years ago, and I sort of said, okay, well, why not? I bet I'm in Silicon Valley, and there's probably a lot of active hams here. So I nursed it back to life, got it, found a new battery for it, and started listening on the local repeaters, and started talking to some people. I found this whole linked repeater system called the WIN system, where there were a lot of active people. And then I had also remembered a couple times going to field day, and I used to think that, oh, that's a whole lot of fun. First of all, since I didn't have any HF privileges, this was kind of the only time of the year that I could sit down in front of a radio and just sort of try that thing out after Grandpa was gone. And I went to the AWRL website. I looked up all the local clubs, and I said, I kind of found one that looked like they did a pretty big field day, and I just sort of started showing up to the meetings, and getting to know it. And little did I know that this was, I would say, one of the most serious field day groups in the United States. I mean, they have an interesting way of going about it. It's the West Valley Amateur Radio Association. They use the call sign K6EI, and if you look at the field day results in every category, not just 1 alpha, 2 alpha, they would have consistently the second highest score, second only to W3AO. So I assumed that meant, oh, these guys are trying really hard. I'll get the maximum enjoyment from the highest score, I guess. And it turns out that that's a whole lot of fun. But I didn't even know about contesting, believe it or not. I thought that field day was the only thing that was quite like field day. I didn't realize that you could do this almost every weekend, and you didn't even have to go out, amongst the mosquitoes and the hot weather and the outdoors. And I was always sort of kind of afraid of that stuff. You could do it from your house. You could do it from the comfort of your own home, and make all these contacts. And so yeah, I was very excited by that prospect. So I saved up a little bit and bought my own HF radio. Now I live in a community that has of townhomes, and a very strict HOA, so I'm not able to really put anything up. But I did manage to sneak in a dipole in the attic, and start. I would find these contests, like CQ Worldwide. I'd get on. I didn't even know all the rules, right? I didn't know that you couldn't there was 0 points to contact somebody in your same country. But I would sit there, and over the course of the weekend, I'd make 150 contacts, and I was thrilled every time I heard worked even a Canadian. I was thrilled by this idea. This was so cool to see this little wire in my attic, making that actually possible. It was pure magic.
So first of all, it recalls a conversation I had with Doug Grant, K1DG, in which he said also that his first introduction to contesting was field day. And I think he even called it the gateway drug to contesting, because it gave him that sense that this is possible, that you could do, so many contacts per hour, and just kind of that thrill. Also, I'm so happy to hear that 150 contacts using your dipole in the attic was that exciting to you, because I think it is for all of us. I think that's where we begin. A lot of what I do on this show is talk to some serious contesters like yourself now. But I think it's easy to think that if you're not in the Bill Faring, Levi Jeffries, Dan Craig, Chris Hurlbut, Randy Thompson sphere, then you're not a contester. And the fact is, there are thousands of contesters out there that are happy to submit a log with 300 QSOs or 500 QSOs.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to get to was your dipole in the attic hasn't slowed you down either. I think that what I've seen from your track record, you've made a lot of friends in the hobby and borrowed a lot of stations, or been involved with stations where you've helped kind of with the mechanics so that you can get on the air.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Tell me about your relationships in the community that have given you access to stations around the world, really.
Yeah. So well, the first thing I'll say just about contesting in general is that, again, for somebody who's just sort of naturally shy and I would say introverted, contesting is almost ideal in some way, because the contexts are very predictable and they're very short, right? Like we exchange a piece of information and that's it. I don't have to talk to you about anything else. In, out, done, right? And that's always sort of been a big appeal of the whole thing in some ways, right? But when it came to sort of branching out, I had met a few people that were involved in the local contesting community. So one of them was Jack, W6FB. He's actually one of the people responsible for the software in the KPA 500. He was at Ellercraft for a little while doing that. And he sort of started to encourage me, hey, there's a club of people that only are interested in contesting. And I had sort of figured out that this field day, club that I was hanging out with, that really wasn't their focus. They were sort of a general purpose club. And he sort of said, hey, you just start coming to these meetings. And I go to the website, and I the first thing I see is, hey, how do you join NCCC? Well, you fill out this application, and the application asks questions like, what contests, are you typically focused in? What have you won? And then I even find out that, hey, you're going to go to a meeting and they're going to vote on you. They're going to decide if you're even good enough to be in our club. And actually, that scared me away for a year. I'm like, and even Jack told me, no, don't worry about that. It's not a big deal. But I saw that on the go. My 150 QSOs in the attic are not going to be good enough for what I'm getting into. But eventually I got over that, and I joined, and I started getting to know a few of the people, and one person in particular who really sort of invited me into their station and said, it's just down the street in Cupertino, was a guy by the name of Tom McShane, NW6P, and he has a station that's sort of on top of I'd say it's like a 350, 400 foot knoll. He had primarily been doing a lot of DXing over his life, and he had he had recently lost his wife. He had recently had a stroke. He was actually in the hospital, and when he got out, a few people tried sort of got his station back up into operating condition. But he didn't necessarily want to operate the radio. What he really wanted was somebody to come in and be a friend and enjoy the hobby with him. And he had said, hey, kid, if you want to knock yourself out with my Alpha 87 and my beam, which is a very it's a relatively loud station, you're more than welcome to come spend the weekend. I have extra bedrooms. I have I'll feed you. I'll give you any advice that you want. And he just sort of let me move in, as it were, right? Every week, it started off with just one contest, and I could only do voice and RIDI at the time, because I didn't know CW yet. But I started getting more and more interested, right? I would just come to every weekend that there was a contest. that was, sort of, big enough, I would just try a little harder. I'd set my own goals. I'd try to, um, you know, I- I was always excited for the next thing. And then I even started realizing that within the NCCC, we had this intra club competition where we were competing against ourselves. The West Coast isn't necessarily the best place to do contesting just because of our, proximity to Europe. So, um, but I could try to, be head to head against somebody like, Hank W6SX. And I really got into this competition because it sort of seemed like, hey, I realize I'm starting to get a little better at this. What if I showed up to every one of these and put in a big score. I also started realizing that, hey, these it's not necessarily about every individual operator's score. It's about the club score. Maybe we can compete as a club, and even if I don't win, I can help the club win something. So that was very exciting, and I thought it was it was just a perfect storm, and it's a recipe that I would really like to see us recreate in more places.
So the NCCC, Northern California Contest Club, for those people that don't know, manages the California QSO party, one of the four largest QSO parties in the country. And you guys do a great job with that. Tell me, are you involved with that California QSO party as an operator or as a manager?
Primarily as an operator. I'm pretty, good friends with Dean, and every now and then he has a question about what he should do with the rules, and we talk it over and such. But primarily as an operator, it's logically separated. It's funded by the Northern California Contest Club, board and organization, but it's managed as a separate entity because we didn't really want it to be such that every couple of years the NCCC board changed all the rules or anything like that. Contest has to have some sort of continuity, and there was sort of a core group of volunteers that kind of keep it going.
I want to take it a little bit further, the continuity issue. I mean, obviously with your experience with the NCCC, but also just your contesting experience in general, I know you've been paying attention to a lot of the recent conversation about contests needing to change. And I'd love to get your perspective on that. First, from the club perspective, like what are you hearing? What are you seeing? First of all, are you seeing increased membership in the club? And what are you hearing from the club members of what they would like to see contesting look like in the future? Because I think it's an important question to ask, because these are people that have committed to joining a club, being part of a community, and then contributing in some way to the points. So what does that look like to you?
I see a couple different patterns, right? So first of all, I would say that we are in a little bit of danger in this hobby in terms of the amount of new people that are getting involved. And it's not just the youth. It's really just anybody. Okay. Now, sure, there are examples, like myself. I know that the N6RO team has been bringing a lot of different people in. I know that even people like Tim and N6Win and the larger ND7K team. There have been a lot of examples of people that have that are younger, and they've gotten involved. But in terms of the overall size of the club, if there are like 50 members, and we manage to add 4 or 5, that's still not going to replace the 40 or so of those that are left that are sort of older age and aren't necessarily getting involved. So I do see that we have kind of a problem brewing. And I even think about this from the perspective of, hey, if I wanted to go out, invest and build a station, is this hobby even going to be around in a couple of years? And the prospect of getting involved to the degree that I have and having it just disappear on me, and a major part of my life is terrifying. I'm really worried about what could happen if that's the case. So my philosophy is just to enjoy it as much as I possibly can when it's around. But yes, if there's ever any somebody new that's looking for mentorship or looking for how do I get more involved, I always try to go out of my way to help them in any way that I can. Whether it's advice, whether it's in trying to invite them into some of the other the places that I know have empty seats, because that's the only way that we're going to get out of it. And I've had some conversations with the likes of Josh Nass last week at Visalia, and I think a lot of it, if you kind of look at even my own story, is an exposure problem. How are we, how are people seeing, how many people are seeing this fun thing that they could be applying all of these different disciplines to, whether it's engineering, whether it's just operating skill or something else, to um, and coming up with something so much fun out of it. I would, the only thing that I'm a little worried about is this whole notion that we have to radically change what we've got in order to, have mass appeal. Because I think that it's, at least from my perspective, it's almost as appealing as it needs to be anyway. And really, the question is what is the barrier to entry? And I think, if you look at out here, a piece of land is several $1 million if it's ready for contesting, and that's before we put any towers up or done any of that. So that's I'm just a little bit worried about whether like what does it even take to actually get started in this hobby compared to say buying a couple $1,000 gaming PC. And if that's what if what we think is just changing the game is going to fix it, I'm just a little skeptical of that, right? I think that what we have to do is attract as many people on the merits of the system as it exists today, but see if people that have already invested in stations are willing to let others operate them, and make sure that they have the support network and the ability to get advice, get mentorship, and get involved.
So, Bill, I hear you pretty clearly that you have this worry about the future of the hobby. You don't think that it involves radical change in order to grow the hobby. I like your focus on exposure. I guess I'm a little stuck on the investment part. I do agree that there'd be a pretty substantial investment if you want to get into contesting at a higher level. But if I look around at the people in parks on the air, they're doing that relatively inexpensively. To buy a buddy pole antenna and a used 480, and they're on the air. So it takes me back. I mean, if you agree with that, it takes me back to exposure. Are we really creating the visibility for the hobby that is necessary? And I'm curious about your thoughts on that. I mean, and you can disagree with me if you think I've got it wrong.
No, I don't think that I really like these, sort of some of these grassroots projects like Parks on the Air. I actually didn't know a whole lot about it until recently, and I sort of figured out what they were doing. And there's a lot of aspects of it. Like, for example, you don't have to necessarily submit a log to anybody. You don't have to announce anything ahead of time. The minimum barrier to entry is just a couple of contacts. It's not, we're not forcing you to install, software on your computer. We're not forcing you to live stream your effort in the park. It's very easy. It's very straightforward to get involved, right? It's something that and you can see it's very successful from a mass appeal standpoint. I would love to see how we can do the same thing in contesting, but again, I don't know if we can necessarily downsize it in the exact same way that they're doing. But again, I've seen counter cases like, for example, even just these little leagues that these contest clubs will let one member compete against another. I think that that works really well.
What are you seeing at NCCC? What are they doing to get more people on the air? Because obviously you're dealing with a select group of people that have already chosen contesting, and I'm presuming that all 40 or 50 members aren't getting involved with every contest. So what is that club doing to promote more people to get on the air, number one, and number two, to bring more members into the club and make it feel attainable, I guess. You told the story about waiting a year because it seemed intimidating to you to put in an application, and clearly they're going to say yes to you, but you thought maybe it's going to be a no. What are you seeing? And I ask this not to focus inordinately on the NCCC, but that's really a microcosm, I would think, of what's going on with a lot of contest clubs around the country. Like, what are you doing to grow the ranks of contesters?
I don't know that the NCCC has necessarily been what's been driving this. I think a lot of the local stations have been driving this, to be honest. I think that so one thing that I've actually seen very successfully happen is every time one of us has worked somebody in, say, sweepstakes with a very high check number. Just as one idea, right? And we notice that they're in one of the sections that are nearby. We might reach out and say, hey, you had a really nice signal. Hey, would you like to come operate at N6RO or something like that? I've seen that work a whole bunch. Really, it's just even finding the members that we do have and saying, hey, is there anything that we can do to get you to get on for this weekend where we're all trying to go after a common goal like Gritty Roundup or NAQP or something like that. And it's been challenging, Kevin. I mean, it's just one of these things where we're competing against so many other distractions and things that take people's time, and we're for a number of years it wasn't even necessarily as fun as it could have been because the propagation wasn't there. Now that the propagation is there, I think I've actually seen just a couple of encouraging patterns. Like, for example, a couple weeks ago, Bud Trench posted that in the WPX phone contest, he had a record number of log submissions, over 8,000. It's never happened before. So really, it's just taking the people that we've got, making sure that they have a place to operate, making sure that they have an opportunity to learn from somebody, and making sure that it gets followed through with.
So I want to take you back to the idea that radical change is not necessary. So let's assume that that's true. Is some change necessary? Do you see elements of contesting where change, or let's forget change, let's talk about evolution, where evolution could help the contesting niche?
Yeah, I think there are all kinds of opportunities. Okay, like one example that I gave on the Visalia contesting forum is that, and this is something that I'm absolutely guilty of. So I'll do a contest, and I'll be so completely exhausted by the end of it that the only thing that I want to do is go eat dinner or whatever and fall asleep. And then I don't necessarily submit the log or write a 30 right away. Okay. And what happens is that then Monday comes around, I end up back in work. I'm in meetings from the minute I wake up to the just about when I give it up. And pretty soon before I know it, it'll be Friday, and we're coming up against the log submission deadline. And I'm starting to get the emails from the contest sponsors. Why haven't you sent your log in yet? And it's nothing. It's nothing personal. I mean, I just forgot about it, got away from me. Just little things like, what if in the contest software, I could just hit a button and it just goes right in. And in fact, we already have that for Super Check Partial. Stu K6TU, who was doing that before I just started work on it, had managed to talk to all of the people who were working on the major pieces of software for contest logging, and get a feature installed where they could submit the log via an API to us. What if we did that for everything? It would be. I think that would overnight increase the number of logs that get submitted to contests by at least 20, 30, maybe even more percent. Okay. I mean, if you look at what happened to Super Check Partial, it used to be that you had to email the log to get it in the database. And we're already over 10x the number of logs that are getting submitted to just that alone. So just these little things that I think would lower the barrier to entry, or just get rid of the make the user experience just a little bit better. And I even think that that's how you get a little closer to things like, well, I dare not say the words real-time logging or real-time adjudication, but faster adjudication, right? Like the fact that we have to have the contest submission date a week after the contest ends. And sometimes this isn't even just a matter of did I even have internet access to the contest station, or did the contest end and then I got in a plane and 24 hours later I'm home and forgot about that part? Or could the online scoreboard be opt out instead of opt in? Like right now, you have to actually go into the contest logger and say, I want to submit this. And, most people don't feel that strongly about it, but I think that, if you just turned it on by default, then, most people wouldn't even know how, to turn it off. So they probably wouldn't. You'd have to go look up how to do it and go find the button. So a lot of these changes, I really think, are things that could happen that wouldn't completely change the dynamic of the contest, yet would actually start paying dividends in terms of just these small little hurdles that cause people not to necessarily engage as much.
So, Bill, I'm cognizant that a lot of people that listen to this show are relatively new back into the hobby or new to the hobby. Talk to me about super check partial. I know it may seem obvious to you, but tell me the genesis of that and how that works, how a ham radio operator could take advantage of that.
Sure. So super check partial is actually very simple. There are a lot of people who think it's more than it is. But really what it is at the end of the day is it's a list of call signs that have been seen in contest logs more than a certain number of times. Okay. It's actually nothing more than that. That's the whole story. There are pre-fill files that other people maintain of like names and contests where you exchange names and states and such, but super check partial only focuses on just that one aspect of it. And the reason that it's useful is that when you're trying to copy a call sign or even just part of a call sign, and you type it into your the entry window in your logger, it can sort of fill in the blanks that you didn't quite get or weren't quite sure about. Okay, so let's say that I hear W1DEB instead of DED, right? And most contest software will tell me that, hey, there is a call sign in the super check partial that's W1DED, and let's say that you're really you're right at the noise floor. I can barely hear you. There's some loud European just above me that's completely squashing you. I might be able to hear that last D, or figure out that since you are in the database, that maybe it's DED and not DEB. Okay, now there's a danger to that. You might have this confirmation bias where you actually accidentally, it really was W1DEB that was calling, and you fill in DED, and you get a busted call. But there's a lot of ways that you can use this. Sometimes in the logging software you can put a question mark in place of a letter that you're missing, and it'll show all the possible completions of that. And it's a tool. Now the way that it works is that either by email, or you send me your just contribute your contest log after the contest is over, just logs at supercheckpartial.com. That's the old way. Or now in most of the contest logging software, if you generate a Cabrillo file, and a little box will pop up and say, hey, do you want to send this to Super Check Partial? You say yes, or hopefully always. And as soon as that happens, it submits an API call to our web server, and it just adds it to the database of logs that I have. And as such, every month I compile that. I look at all the logs that I have for the last 2 years, and I produce this list. And then all the contest loggers can go ahead and download that list and use it for what they're going to. And every now and then I'll if somebody sends me a request, I try to respond to every email. Hey, you should remove this call sign because it's really just a bust of mine. I'll investigate it a little bit. Or hey, I haven't been using this call sign in a couple of years. It's fallen out of your database. Could you add it just for the next month? And then the natural algorithm will take over. So that's sort of been one of those general purpose functions of I guess pieces of glue that make kind of hold contesting together, right? If no one was doing that effort, then it wouldn't necessarily be happening at all.
So, Bill, clearly there's a lot of threads that I could pursue, but we're going to run out of time. I do want to talk about Visalia before we finish up. I just attended, met you for the first time, met actually many ham radio operators for the very first time after interviewing them or talking to them on the radio. For me, it was a great experience. I do understand that the attendance was down, but give me your take on Visalia and why you attended and what you got out of it.
I primarily go to Visalia for the hallway track, as we've sort of called it, right? And that is to just meet up with a bunch of friends that I haven't seen outside of on the air in a while, and from that perspective, it was a very successful trip. Okay, now there were a couple of aspects of it. I just bought an airplane and I wanted to fly it down, and I had a mechanical failure right before it. I didn't get to do that, so I was a little bummed about that. But I did get to meet with a bunch of people that, again, I wanted to talk to a bunch. I wanted to, have a really good talk with Eric Schwartz over at Ellicraft about remote, and just ask him what's going on with that, and how, when can I test? I wanted to, just meet up with as many people as I can, and sort of exchange ideas. So what I'll tell you is that, hey, if you want to get involved in some of these multi-ops, just as a new contester and stuff, these relationships are critical. Like, if you, it's really nice to just sort of, invite yourself to, someone else's, nice QTH or something like that. And in a few cases, I was sort of looking for a place to do some more W6 operating from, as a single op, and I talked to the K6 MTU guys about that, and so very successful from that standpoint. Visalia has had a couple years where the pandemic had canceled it outright. They tried a virtual version of it once, and that was actually a pretty good success. But last year I was really encouraged when it seemed to be a very robust event. This year the participation was definitely down, quite a bit. Now the good news is, at least for me, the people that were there were the serious ones, and they were the guys that I would have probably sought out anyway. But I really hope that we're back to at least where we were even in 2023 next year. There's some debate of whether it was promoted enough, whether or not there could have been more prizes or more reasons, more content to get people involved. I I'll go to Dayton. I'll see. My guess is that we won't quite have the same effect. We'll just have to see. And the other thing that I was really worried about when I was there is that, at least in the contesting area, I might have been, at the young age of 38, the youngest person in the room, and that really bothered me. All these discussions with AA0Z and others about how we're in such danger, and me even 15 minutes ago saying that I don't know that this hobby needs to change, but I have to say there was a little bit of a moment of a wake up call, and saying, if this is the kind of attendance numbers that we're going to pull at an event like this, we're in real trouble.
Well, it's an interesting observation. I was sitting in the audience while you were on the panel, and I think that the panel, including yourself and Scott KOMD, did a remarkable job. I actually thought it was one of the best presentations of the week. Interactive. I liked his Slido survey, and that was all great. But there was a point where I was thinking to myself, well, let's ask the younger contesters in the room, and quickly realized there were none. So I think your observation is right, that if those younger people aren't in the room to weigh in with questions or comments, then are we really getting a robust conversation? I want to go back to what you had said, though, about going to Visalia or any of these in-person meetings in order to get invited to multi-ops. It recalls a conversation that I had with Adrian Sperka early on, and he desperately wanted to go on a DXpedition, and he was doing all the things necessary to develop the skills. He was actually traveling himself to Caribbean locations and getting experience. But he said that it wasn't until he went to Dayton and Visalia, where he actually made those contacts in person, that he started getting invited to DXpeditions. And as we both know, now he's gone on, 20, 30. They just keep on coming. So it was a great experience for me as a first timer, and I really can't wait to go back again next year, and need to make my plans for Dayton. Bill, are there any final thoughts for us before I let you go? I'm sure there's other things we could talk about, but again, I'm cognizant that you're at work and you probably have other things other than talking to me on your agenda today. But any final comments?
Sure. Well, the only thing that I would say is that there's nothing that comes easy in life in terms of especially this hobby, right? I looked at some of these conversations that have happened recently about the real time and aspect and stuff, and a lot of them have sort of been around to I'm a small guy. I'm never going to be able to compete with the big guys, and I have to say, I started at the same spot. Okay, I started with a dipole, in the attic and all of that. And what I really want to get back to is the skill of operating. Okay, and what really, if you look at somebody like Dan or Chris, what kind of investment they had to do to get to the level that they operate at, and how much you can sort of learn from what they're already doing. Okay. What you need to do is you do need to go to Visalia and Dayton and meet these people. See if you can start getting invited to some of these places where you can learn these skills and sort of start picking up these little tidbits, and realize that it takes a good half a year. These people they spend leading up to, say, CQ Worldwide for 48 hours of 2BSIQ. They start in July and they start practicing Morse Runner and Rough Sea every single day for hours. And even my own involvement is it's been tough to sit next to somebody who's so good, compare yourself, and get just realize how humbling it might be that you're not necessarily going to be able to operate at that level for a long time. And the other thing that you got to realize is that never sell yourself short, because you may have other things that you can bring to the table. I'll even admit freely, I'm not the best operator in the room in most of these places. In fact, I might be the worst operator in the room. But what I do try to bring to the table is things like, can I help you with station automation? I can do that. I do software professionally, and I all of these little projects, pushing the envelope, sort of thinking within the realm of the contest rules and such. I actually have almost more fun doing that than I do operating the contest itself. All this preparation, like I like to say, Dan-proofing a station, making sure that it can't get blown up, break amplifiers, radios, and so forth. I would hope that when you realize what we're doing here in contesting isn't just about the operating. It's about everything. It's about the antennas. Can you climb a tower? It's about the the team building. It's about all these little, it's about the IT aspect. It's about all these little things. So you got to find what part of this actually does give you the most joy, and maybe it's more than one of those. So I just encourage people, branch out, make sure that you're not, assuming that the only reason that you're not having fun with this is because the rules aren't different. Try to first of all, make sure that you find similar-minded people and get aligned with them. Go to Dayton, go do that. That's how the eyeball cues are actually, I think, what are going to make this the most fun for you, more than the operating itself, for sure.
Well, I do want to underscore your comment about operating skills, because I'm talking to some of the best contest operators in the world on this channel. And it always amazes me that somebody like Chris Hurlbut, KL9A, can go to Montana with a modest station. I mean, it'll be a bigger station someday, but he's at the modest station size right now. And he and his team pulled in a very respectable score from Montana. Or Randy Thompson, K5ZD. I'm always amazed that he can put in what looks like a part-time effort. Like his summary on 3830 scores is, I went out to dinner with my wife, I saw a movie, I did all these things. And then you look at his scores, like, oh my God, like clearly this isn't just about having a superstation. This is about having experience and operating skills, as you said, knowing how to put the right station together. And I think that is something that gets missed sometimes in this conversation. People think that if you're not K1LZ or K9CT or K3LR, then obviously you're got to be at this huge disadvantage. And I don't think that's true. And then of course, if you look at the rest of it, as you just said, what are you really in it for? To have fun, to make improvements, to meet people? Then there are a lot of other reasons to get involved with the contest. So I think that's great advice, great way to end the conversation. I really appreciate you taking time today, Bill, from the West Coast, and I know that we'll have many more of these conversations in the future.
Anytime, Kevin. Thanks so much.
I've been talking to Bill Faring, W9KKN. You can check him out on QRZ, and I know you'll see him at one of many stations across the country doing multi-op or single-op contesting in the future.